Fort Collins, everyone loves living here, right? Well, today I might ruffle some feathers sharing 7 reasons people hate living in Fort Collins on Discover Fort Collins. Hi, I'm Amy Holton with the group Real Estate. I'm going to start with reason number 1, why people hate living in Fort Collins: population. Now, Fort Collins has a nice small town feel in many ways, but people who've lived here a long time are getting a little bit frustrated with how quickly it has grown. I, for one, grew up here. I remember when my parents had their house built on the south side of town and everything was open field on the other side of the new development, which is now a bustling, congested area of Fort Collins off of Harmony Road. But at the time, back in the 80s, says a little bit about my age, it was still a small town feel. And people have lived here even longer have even more of that sentiment of the overcrowding and the increased traffic, and all of that happens with a bustling city. But on the flip side, there's way more things to do in Fort Collins than there used to be. And so there are the pros and cons to a growing population for sure. Now, I will say to people that are wanting a bustling city life, some people might feel like Fort Collins is a little too slow pace for them. And so on both sides, you have to know Fort Collins is the 4th largest city in Colorado, but it's not number 1. And it's not the smallest anymore either. And so you'll have to weigh what's most important to you if you move here and if you currently live here. So the second reason people may hate living in Fort Collins these days is overcrowding and rapid growth, closely related to the first one on population. But things have changed quickly in this area because people love living here in general, and so a lot of people have moved here. And the problem is it's increased traffic at an alarming rate because the infrastructure can't keep up with the kind of growth that we've had. And specifically, you'll see this trying to commute on I-25. They are doing a lot of construction in that area, and if there's an accident or something that's slowing down the traffic, it's a big headache, I'll just say that. Very different than when I was growing up here. In the 90s, my parents moved out by Windsor, Loveland area, out in a big field where my dad was a developer. We lived out there, but I was going to high school in downtown Fort Collins, and I would take I-25 to get to school each day. It took almost no time. There was no traffic. I could watch the beautiful sunrise and the mountains and see everything clearly. Very different case today that you'll find with just constant movement of traffic all throughout Fort Collins and especially on I-25. The irony in my case personally is that my family currently lives in Fort Collins, and my daughters ended up going to a private school out in the same field where I used to live in high school. So their commute was going the opposite direction from Fort Collins out by Windsor, Loveland. And as a mom, knowing that they were driving on that road now totally terrified me because it's such a different scenario than it was 30 years ago. Moving on to the third reason people may hate living in Fort Collins, and that is that Fort Collins, though it has a lot of amenities, lacks a lot of the urban amenities you're going to find in a bigger city. So let's think of, NFL and Major League Baseball and big hockey games, sporting events, right? You're going to have smaller events here, but the big stuff is going to happen in the city. Same thing with a large music venue. Your largest venues for the big name stars, that's going to be in Denver as well. Although we have a lot of great music events, especially in the summer here in Fort Collins. And sometimes we have some big name bands that come for those events as well. The other thing to keep in mind with urban amenities, Fort Collins has a lot of options when it comes to restaurants and shopping and all of that. Some people are just pleasantly surprised when they move here at all the options. However, you will find that certain specialty or cultural restaurants and experiences, you're going to have better chance finding that in Denver. For example, my daughter just turned 18 yesterday, and when we asked her where she wanted to eat, she didn't want to eat at any restaurants here in Fort Collins. She wanted to go to Denver to a specialty Bonchon chicken Korean barbecue. And so, there's going to be some things, culturally speaking, that you will not find here in Fort Collins. And you'll just find yourself traveling maybe an hour away to get what you want. The fourth reason people may hate living in Fort Collins is the job market. Now, I will say we have a thriving economy. Major employers like HP, Agilent, Otterbox, CSU, UC Health, and other health industries. There are a lot of options here, don't get me wrong. But if you're in a niche job market, you might have to go an hour or so away to get those kind of jobs. Reason number 5 why people may not love living in Fort Collins, in fact, they may hate it, is the weather. The weather, we often say Colorado is bipolar in weather because it is so up and down. In fact, right now it's sunny. An hour ago it was raining and 45 degrees. Now it's 55 degrees and sunny. So it's always changing around here. And some people love that, right? I grew up in the Midwest in Minnesota, Wisconsin, where we had very harsh winters that lasted for months on end. There was no melting of snow. It was cold all year round. Here, you will have snow and you will have cold, but you'll have days like this where it just all melts immediately. And so some people feel like it's just too harsh of a winter, too drastic of changes, too dry. The summer is arid and dry for the most part. We do have seasons of drought. Fall, I will say this fall is the most beautiful I've seen in a while because we had a moist spring and summer, and so fall was colorful and mild and it lasted a long time. You still have it. Now some falls are a little more drastic where we might have a snowfall in the end of September, early October. That's not normal, but it does happen. And same thing in the spring. Beautiful springs, sometimes that winter lasts a little longer. Sometimes it feels like, oh, we have a beautiful mild spring, and then suddenly you get this huge snowfall with this heavy wet snow in March or April or once in a while even May. So it's a little unpredictable as far as weather around here. But then again, if you grew up in the Midwest or some harsher area, you may find it to be a much better situation for you. Now, on the other hand, I lived in San Diego for 3 years. My family lived in San Diego fairly recently. And I will say winter feels extremely long after living in a mild climate like California. The sixth reason people may hate living in Fort Collins is it has a limited cultural diversity here. Now, I will say because of Colorado State University being in town, we do have people coming from all over the world. So we certainly have some cultural diversity in Fort Collins, but to some people, it's just not enough. Seventh and final reason why people hate living in Fort Collins, it's the cost of living. I will say the largest expense that you will find here is housing. Whether it's renting or purchasing, it has gotten expensive in Fort Collins. Some people may say, well, compared to where I'm coming from, it's nothing. That may be the case, but if you look at the general cost of living throughout America, Fort Collins is higher. Now, when it comes to groceries, healthcare, education, taxes, we're actually pretty average and maybe even lower in some of those categories, but definitely keep in mind the cost of living regarding housing is going to be high. Hey, thanks for joining me today on Discover Fort Collins. If this was helpful for you, I encourage you to watch Is the Cost of Living in Fort Collins Worth It? This is Amy Holton with the Group Real Estate, helping you find the place you belong here in Northern Colorado.